Women are powerful creators. The Align Women podcast features female entrepreneurs, leaders, and other professional women who've demonstrated agency and innovation in their personal and professional lives. I'm your host, Amy Evans. I have authentic, intimate conversations with my guests that highlight their paths to success, their struggles and accomplishments, and the things that currently excite, motivate, and inspire them to turn their visions into reality. Welcome to the Align Women podcast. I'm Amy Evans, your host and the founder of Align Women, a leadership and networking organization for professional women. This podcast features female entrepreneurs, leaders, and other professional women who've demonstrated agency and innovation in their personal and professional lives. With me today, I'm really excited to have Pat Griffey. She's a Medicare specialist in South Bend, Indiana, and she's also currently serving as the president of the National Association of Health Underwriters, which is my industry association. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So excited to have you here. And for those in the audience who aren't familiar with the National Association of Health Underwriters, tell us what that organization does and tell us what your current role is.
So yes, I'm currently the president nationally. I've served on the board of trustees now since 2013. We were actually established in 1929, and we are a professional association, very similar to doctors in the American Medical Association, but we are professional health insurance agents and those people that work closely to NAHU. We advocate for our members, we educate our members, and we provide member benefits to our members. So those are basically the three pinnacles of what we do for the association members.
And currently serving as president, what are your responsibilities?
Well, actually, I do travel quite a little bit, and we do have our monthly meetings, monthly board meetings. And of course, I will oversee the annual convention coming up in the end of June in Chicago, and also Capitol Conference, which is actually a little closer here. It's coming up this week, as a matter of fact. We'll be in D.C. meeting there for Capitol Conference and going up on the Hill and doing some work there and talking to our legislators about the legislation that impacts our industry and our clients.
I so respect and appreciate the work that you do for an industry that I have been in for 17 years. And I understand the importance of the work that NAHU does, especially at the legislative level. So I very, very much appreciate all the service you've given. And obviously, serving as president is the current point in a long line of service that you've given to the organization at the local and the state level. So thank you so much for being of service to our industry. So I want to jump into some questions. I'm really excited about having this conversation with you. We could probably have an entire conversation about the health insurance industry and everything that has happened and is predicted to happen in the next few years. And we'll get into that a little bit, but I also want to have a more personal conversation with you. And one of the things that jumped out as we were preparing for this podcast is you told me that you wanted to be introduced on the podcast as a formerly reluctant and often surprised leader. And I relate very much to that. And I want to hear what that journey's been like for you. What moved you out of reluctance in a leadership role? And what have you learned about yourself as a leader?
So yeah, I think a lot of it comes from some of the stigma that might be attached to leadership within a very male-dominated arena. And I'll talk more about a book that kind of speaks to that here in a little bit. But I didn't want to be kind of classed in a certain way. I didn't want to be certain things that I thought in my mind were leaders, okay? I didn't see leadership as my own sense of values and then people, if you will, buying into my values for what I see for our association going forward. So as I was in the lower levels, for lack of a better way to put it, I guess you have to say that when you're in a local chapter, you're on a lower level of leadership. It's one thing to have opinions and ideas and do what you want to do with your local chapter. You see them regularly all the time. Then I went to the state and I saw the state and they had different opinions and I still didn't see myself as a leader. I saw someone as a servant who was working for the people and the members of our association. Then I became a regional vice president over 6 states. I started to get a glimpse of it during that time period, but I was still very much involved in managing the association, managing the 6 states I had, and then also bringing information down to the states and taking it back to the board from those states. I think where it really settled in was once I was on the national board, on the executive committee level in particular, I was able to see the whole country. I was able to see a much bigger glimpse and realize that I'm at the point of this thing where a lot of people have no concept of what's happening in DC, and they're kind of depending on us to keep an eye on that. And so when I now say this association has a life and a future, I know it does because I see what's behind the curtain, if you will, that some people aren't able to see or aren't willing to get involved in, perhaps. So my passion comes from that. So today, I do think of myself as a leader more because of what NAHU has done, is doing, and is going to do going into the next few years, especially.
So let's talk about going into the next few years. You shared with me that NAHU has just completed working on a project called Vision 2025.
Yep.
And I imagine that's going to be a big topic of conversation, both at Capitol Conference coming up and also at the National Convention. Share with me what that project was like. What was the intention of coming up with Vision 2025, which is a strategic plan for NAHU for the next 5 years?
Sure. Well, we already had gone through 2015, 2020, and this was 2025. So it somewhat fell within my leadership capacity. And I have to admit that it made it easy because our past president, Rusty Rice, actually picked a group of people throughout the association involved in various types of insurance, from Medicare all the way up to mega groups of thousands, okay? And even some who were involved in compliance issues when it came to health insurance and meeting the laws that they needed to comply with in the HR area. He put those together and called it a working group. And the idea, a futures working group. And the idea of that was for those people to kind of give us an idea of where we were headed. Mm-hmm. Look through the windshield, tell us where we're headed, and tell us what we need to do to better position our members. It's been a labor of love ever since probably about June of last year when we had our first board meeting. We actually went to the carpet and we really beat on this thing until we came down to 7 strong goals that all of us could unite behind. And out of those 7, if someone comes up to me, and I've already done this when I'm out talking to members or people that aren't members, and they ask me a question, why doesn't NAHU do this? Or have you ever thought about doing that for our members? I can literally go back to our goals and I can say that falls under this goal or that goal. And I can direct that to a team because there's a team that's actually assigned to that goal. And so that's what we're going to be. Not only, we only have a goal, we have measurables attached to that as well. And we have timelines through the next 5 years, which tells us whether we're hitting the mark or not. Is it static? No. We may find we need to make adjustments to that. But that particular Vision 2025 program, I'm so excited about it. I can't hardly stand it because there's been so much that's gone into it, and it's not just us making it up. It's people that actually work in those areas as I put these pieces together that have helped us formulate those 7 goals. It tells us where we need to be going forward the best that we're able to. We had, just to give you an example, it's okay if I just give you a couple, maybe I could talk about a couple?
I'd love to hear about them, yes.
Okay. Well, the first one, for example, is changing consumer expectations. Mm-hmm. So consumers may be the person who purchases the end product, the health insurance, or some form of it. Mm-hmm. It might also be a member or a non-member, a producer, okay? And so that particular goal is to make sure that we're meeting the needs of both the consumer as an agent or a producer, and also that we as an association are meeting the needs of that member or that producer out in the field, or however they're associated to what we do from a day-to-day perspective. Mm-hmm. The other one, though, is technology, and I'd like to give just a little bit of background for those that aren't familiar with health insurance. So for all of the years of health insurance up until about the year 2000, it was always a look in the rearview mirror look at health insurance and how we were developing claims. Mm-hmm. From that, our actuaries then decided that, okay, we recognize that we have babies up until about the age of 35. So those young women would have higher rates. after that, then they would continue to have preventive care where men didn't. Men would wait until they presented at the hospital at age 55 for a heart attack, right? They didn't go to see the doctor. So that's how our rates were developed over all of those years until about 2000. So now we're beginning to see artificial intelligence, blockchain technology claims. So all of this is stuff that as an industry is very new to us, and yet it's coming whether we like it or not. So we have one goal that is very specific to technology. That technology goal is not only just the new app that we're going to be rolling out this year for our members, so that they don't have to do it online always. They've got it on their phone or their smartphone if they need it, or their tablet. But it's also watching that new technology, that big data, because that's going to be forecasting the claims. Now it's through the windshield look at what we're doing with claims and how we're setting rates. It's no longer looking in the rearview mirror. And it's still in transition, but that's the stuff that our members need to know more about and that we need to be better positioned to handle as we move forward, because it's moving very fast right now.
Right.
So those are the two I would throw out just as an example of the 7 that we've done.
That's exciting. I love to hear forward-thinking, technology-driven thought processes in our industry, which tends to be not always forward-thinking
Right.
and technology-driven. And also, as an end user, it can be difficult to find the through line with all the information. Most of the time when I'm presented with a new idea or a new way of doing things, it's from a vendor that is trying to get my attention and sell this concept to me. And I don't always know if that's the most forward thinking, if that's the best way to go. It may be the first time I've heard of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the full picture. And so having NAHU involved in that conversation is really valuable to me, because I have a way to get educated from the lens of my position as an agent and what's going to work best for me and for my clients, as opposed to trying to sift through what the people trying to sell me the ideas are doing. So.
And actually, I'm glad you said that too, because we are doing a lot more on the technology side of what, not only the app that we're using, but also having available for a discount position on some of the technology pieces. For example, smaller agencies may be able to use 1 or 2 of our different options that provide them a real easy solution for a CRM to be able to manage the block. You and I have talked about this before, what carriers are out there to do that, or what companies are out there to do that. And that's what keeps some of our members more active, and they can continue to get better at doing that, and we'll help them with that. But that's part of our goal. And I will also say I picked technology for another reason. That is because it touches all of the other 6 goals in one way, shape, or form. So it's very important that we keep our eye on that ball and stay ahead of it.
I am excited to hear more about this as you reveal more about Vision 2020
Sure.
or 2025, because we're already in 2020. Oh my goodness.
Right.
So we talked about a couple big events that are coming up for you. You'll have a huge presence at Capitol Conference in Washington, D.C. and at the National Convention. Let's talk about the Women's Leadership Summit that my state organization, the California Association of Health Underwriters, is putting on in March in Las Vegas. And you will be a keynote speaker at that event. I'm super excited to see you speak there. Tell me what we can look forward to in your talk, and tell me why you think that this event, which is for the women leaders in our industry, is important.
Sure. But actually, I wanted to say, too, that this particular group is very forward thinking on that, because I actually have another one that's being held in New Jersey. I had a tape for them this year because it's exactly the same day. So it's kind of exciting to see these things happening, right?
For sure.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit and talk about something that I read. Now, you'll hear me talk about this a lot. I've been kind of a voracious reader over most of my career. As of this year, I'm 45 years in this crazy business, okay? And still here, still surviving, still enjoying actually doing what I do. But back in I think it was 1990 or 91, there was a book out called The Popcorn Report, and it was written by Faith Popcorn, and I believe that she has several others out since then as well. So she was considered the Nostradamus of American marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, she talked, this is 1991, I believe, she talked about networking. And I think she even dubbed the cocoon theory, the working at home concept and all of that. she was very, very right. And we're seeing a lot of this now, and why this networking is so important. I would say in particular for women. I think it's very difficult for us that are older women. We always were very much head down, nose to the grindstone, do the job, get it done, and I apologize to people who I may have just passed and not realized maybe I needed to be helping them. I'm hearing that now, and I'm glad to hear that there is more of that happening. That particular event, I think, is going to be very helpful for women that are in our industry in particular to begin to realize that we're all very, very similar in the things that we deal with every day, the things that we get frustrated with, and that there are ways to begin to handle those. And types of things that I'll talk about are just how I moved through some of those stages. After 45 years, I've seen a few of them, okay? And I've worked for people and I've worked for myself, and I've bought agencies and I've sold agencies, and I have a lot of this interaction, but I'd like to share some of that while I'm there. And if it helps anyone, then at least hopefully I've made up for some of the years that I didn't.
I don't think anybody holds you responsible. I appreciate that you acknowledge that, and I've written and posted about that idea and the fact that because there are so many more opportunities now, women in my generation and generations after me aren't operating from a scarcity place like women prior to me have had to, because there were so few opportunities, so little scholarship money and grant money and positions available. And so you mentioned women sort of working nose to the grindstone. That's because they had to work twice as hard to make half as much. And I understand why they would sort of wall off in order to build their success in their small corner of the world. And fortunately now there are so many more opportunities and so much more space that there's much more willingness to reach the hand out to bring someone else along, to mentor, to teach, and a spirit of cooperation as opposed to a spirit of competition.
I don't
And
think we thought about it. We really didn't. It didn't occur to us. Susie Johnson, I believe Susie Johnson's connected to your group, as is Megan Chiarello. Megan posted something, and it was very interesting to me that Susie commented, because Susie's, like me, has been in the business for a number of years. And I think Susie said something like, it just never really occurred to us, that we needed to possibly help others. We didn't know how to do that, and perhaps it came, and I will tell you, for me personally, it probably came more from a position of, how is this going to, even if I did, how is this person going to take this? Is this a good constructive criticism, or is it going to be something that person's not going to benefit from? So I may have just held myself back and not said anything, but I'm really glad that door's been open, because I think it's going to help a lot of people. My own daughters, for example, are going through something really similar to this right now. So glad it's out there.
I'm so looking forward to hearing more about your personal experience.
Thank
And
you.
that leads me to another question. I asked you about the hardest lesson that you've had to learn, and you said that I'm not always right. And that's another one I so relate to. So tell me tell me about that. You told me that over the years you've become more discerning. Discerning is one of my favorite words, and in endeavoring to see multiple sides of an issue before making a decision, which I imagine has to come into play a lot in your role at NAHU. So tell me how you've developed that skill to keep in mind that you're not always right, and be open to other thought processes and opinions.
Well, what's interesting about that is that I've always known I wasn't always right. I knew that.
Sure.
But when you're first involved in a new idea, whether it's a new business, it's a new chapter, or it's something you want to try, if you don't have the patience, if you don't have the passion for what you're doing, okay, then you'll probably not be very successful. But when you're very new to it, you have to be very vocal. You have to be very passionate. You have to be very in people's face about this, because that's where your passion is, right? Now, as you grow, whether it's getting bigger, maybe bringing on more people to help, maybe it's a volunteer organization like an NAHU, the more people that get involved, then the more voices there are that can help, that can be heard. And I learned then through that to step back a little bit from that. I used to say when my chapter was very young, and I would say, look, this is a dialogue. This is my opinion. Your job is to challenge me on that. Tell me if I'm wrong. Let me know if I need to incorporate something else. But what happens when you have someone that isn't that outgoing, isn't that able to step up and say, or maybe just isn't ready to step up and say, why don't we try this? Or I don't know if that'll work, or, point out something different. So I've had to learn to step back. I think one of the compliments that I got most recently that made me feel so incredibly good was when someone on the national board said to me, we never know what you're thinking. And to me, as president, I went, yes, because that's what I was after. I wanted to be able to be the one who was listening and bringing this all in. And to some degree, I'm more in the middle, pulling those thoughts together, trying to pull it and make it work together rather than sitting on my own idea. And that's a natural process. I don't think you could be the national president and have just your own idea and not listen to anyone else. I don't think you'd ever get there. Right. But being able to listen, being able to pull those other ideas in, being able to let them share, encouraging them to share. I've even done that. I've even called on people and said, I haven't heard from you. What do you think about this? Because I want them to have a voice. So yeah, I think I always knew I didn't know, but it's just as you move through the process, you begin to realize more and more that you have some very valuable ideas on your team and bring those in too.
Yeah. You synthesized so much of my experience in what you've said, and I hadn't realized that there is a shift at some point in leadership when you're starting something new, as I've done with Aligned Women, and it's been about a year that since I started this organization. The passion is a driver, and the passion makes me vocal about what I'm doing. And there is a point at which I need to take in other opinions and take in other perspectives and do that in service of growing the organization to something much bigger than my initial vision. And I'm struggling with that, to be honest. That's a new role for me. And you put it so beautifully. That's something I'm going to chew on for a while. I'm reading Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, right now. And one of the things that she requires of her team is that everyone come to a meeting with an opinion about the topic. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so valuable, because everybody knows that they're going to be called on, and everyone's expected to have something to contribute to the meeting. And that people are all there because there's a need for them to be there. There is a value for them in them being there. So holding back isn't in service to the bigger vision. And I love that she requires that of her team. It reminds me.
At the end of the day, if you do have that passion for something, that passion is only going to get stronger the more that situation grows. And it'll grow more because you brought more ideas into it. I mean, everybody benefits. It's just a matter of managing it. That's all.
Yeah, I love that. So I asked you another question about the advice that you'd give to your 20-year-old self. And I want to read what you said, because I thought it was put so beautifully that it was perfect on the page. It didn't need to be restated. You said, compare yourself only to yourself, where you were to where you are today. Other people have their own path to walk with different challenges than yours that you will never know. Comparing yourself to someone else is the beginning of frustration and angst, which serves no good purpose. And I think a lot of people struggle with comparison. And how have you learned to put that down and keep the focus on you?
Well, I'd say there were a few life challenges that put me in a position of having to back up a couple paces and realize that my path was different than someone else's. So I can look back on that and I can say, do you remember when you were a single mom? Do you remember when this was that? And there are different things that influenced me than it would someone else. So I try to do that now. So whenever that happens, and I have to admit, I'm human like everybody else is. There are times when I do that. I look at it and go, oh, wow. And then I go, wait a minute, just step back. In my mind, I take a step back. and I realize that I don't have a clue what's going on with that person. I don't, I may hate their life. If I had to live their life to be the kind of person they are, maybe I wouldn't want to be that. So how am I to judge that? That shouldn't even happen. So all I ever tried to do was, did I move forward? So when I find myself doing that and I take the step back, the next thing I want to do is to find a course, find a book, find something that will let me take another step forward. I'm not doing it so I can compare to that person or be better than that person. Quite the contrary. I'm redirecting my thoughts into something that will help me instead of a negative thought, because that's what that's going to be. You'll never win. You will never win if you're trying to compare yourself to someone else. Me, I just want to know, well, where was I 10 years ago? Oh my goodness, really things have changed a lot, since then. And that's a good thing. So that's where that comes from.
And I'd say this seems to be a consistent theme in the way that you approach situations, is that you work to be very mindful internally of where you're coming from, where the other person's coming from, what you don't know, that your perspective is one of many perspectives, and that is a practice that some people use meditation to employ that practice. But one of the things I love about a good meditative practice is that the point of it is to bring that mindfulness into your daily life.
Yep.
Most people can sit still and look very zen when they're on a yoga mat inside a quiet studio or sitting by a lovely stream or something. But when you're in the middle of traffic, or when you're trying to wrangle 20 people who have all different opinions than yours, mindfulness is a very important and very, sometimes very difficult practice to employ. And it sounds like you have worked to cultivate that skill.
I've tried, and I think I've got to give good credit to my kids too, because my two daughters, I have three children. My two older daughters are in their 50s, and they're in business, and they run into these situations from time to time. Whether it's a divorce or a business problem, whatever it might be, I try to remind them, and they're now starting to do it with their children, which is, do I have the energy for this? Can I afford to spend the energy over here over something I can't control? I can't control the traffic. Right. If I'm stuck in a traffic jam, I can't control that. There's no point in getting worked up about it. If I think somebody's been a mean girl, should I be all cranked up over that? Well, you know what? Maybe they've had a bad day. I don't know. But it isn't energy that I need to spend. I need it over here doing what I'm trying to do right now. And that serves a much better purpose, higher purpose, if you will.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So you've alluded to being a voracious reader, and I gave you the opportunity to ask me a question. So we'll both answer this one. The one you posed to me was, what's the best book you've read in the last 12 months? And for me, I mentioned I'm reading Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I've read most of her books. I love her approach. And I mentioned that being in a leadership role, I would say I am have been a reluctant leader, like you mentioned, and understanding sort of the mechanics of being a good leader from her perspective, which is being one of her favorite words, being vulnerable, really being open to other people's perspectives in order to build something that is greater than everyone combined. And that is an interesting process when something starts out as a singular vision and then has to be fed by other people in order for it to grow. So that has been a very impactful book for me. How about you?
Well, before I say mine, I have to tell you with Brené, something that I really, and I struggled with whether or not I should bring this up, but I've read the book and I do know what you're talking about. And I agree with her on another point, and that is, I think you need to become more, we need to become more comfortable with ourselves, putting ourselves out there. That's something that she's very good about. And it's something that was very difficult for me for a long time. And I think that keeps women out of leadership roles. Oftentimes, they may even be in leadership roles like I was for so many years without even admitting I was a leader, because once you admit it, then you're out there. Okay. And, when you're out there, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be times when, things didn't go quite the way you wanted them to. but you just make the best of it, and hopefully that led to something good in the long run. But she's very, very good about putting herself out there and living what I like to refer to as outside of her comfort zone. And
For
that's
sure.
something I've learned to do, tried to learn to do. I'm not always there. I still have my moments, but I think I probably always will. It's just the way it is. My book actually is written by Sally Helgeson, and it's How Women Rise. That book, I'm on my third. I'm listening to it right now. I had an eye issue several years ago. It makes it harder for me to read now, but I'm listening it on Audible, and I'm on my third listen. And every time I listen to it, I pick up something different. She co-wrote that with Marshall Goldsmith, and Marshall Goldsmith, his book, he's written several, but the most recent one for him is What Got You Here Will Not Get You There. But it's written from a global perspective. When he met with Sally and they started talking about how women lead differently from men, he then wanted to put this together. That's all in the foreword of the book, so that we could see the separation. So they have like 12 things that keep women from achieving their goals. And I'll tell you, when you read them all, you'll find yourself in there somewhere. If you're a woman, you'll find yourself, if not once, several times. Maybe hurdles you've already gotten through. I can say there's a couple for myself. The one I pick up right away is what he refers to as ruminating. I'm from the Midwest. I can talk about cows, okay?
Yeah.
So cows chew the cud. It's just ruminating over something over and over. You can make a mistake. You can say something wrong. Every time you put yourself out there, thank you, Brene Brown, every time you put yourself out there, you're going to have one of those times, and you just cannot spend the extra energy ruminating over something you can no longer change. It's already behind you. Just go on forward and do the best next time. And that's how you get better each time you do it. So that's my book. It's How Women Rise. Like I said, I'm on my third listen, and I'll probably listen to it again because I think it's that good.
Wow. I've added that to my book list.
Awesome.
And we'll include a link in the show notes to the book on Amazon so that
Awesome.
people can find it. I so appreciate you sharing that.
Sure, absolutely.
So where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
The easiest way for me is actually through email. I'm traveling a lot right now with NAHU, but pat@patgriffey.com. Pat, and the last name is Griffey, GRIFFEY.com. And that's the easiest way to reach me. And I'm usually checking it either on my phone, whether I'm on the road or whether I'm at home, I'm usually checking it somewhere. So happy to do that.
Got it. And we will include that in the show notes along with links to your website, to the National Association of Health Underwriters, to the Women's Leadership Summit that's coming up in March, and to that wonderful book that you recommended.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Align Women podcast, Pat. It's been delightful to have you.
I've enjoyed it, Amy, and best to you and everything that you're doing, because I think you're making great strides. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Look forward to more episodes with more amazing women at alignwomenpodcast.com. Thanks for listening to the Align Women podcast. You can find more episodes with more amazing women at alignwomenpodcast.com and visit alignwomen.org to learn more about our leadership and networking organization. This is Amy Evans, and you've been listening to the Align Women podcast.